Welcome to the podcast. Today is February 21st, 2020, and we have Dan Ray here. Thank you for joining us, man.
Pleasure to be here.
I really appreciate it.
I feel like we've been trying to do this for about 4 weeks now.
Yeah, we've been trying to set this up, and just shimmying back and forth, and we're both camera guys. We get busy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm glad I could finally make it to your humble dungeon here.
Yeah.
Nutropoli.
I'm really excited to have you, man. This is great.
Thank you.
So we work together at PBS. This is PBS 39, and Dan is a producer, shooter, editor there. So I've worked basically for you, next to you, and I've frustrated you with my footage too. So
hey, we frustrate everyone with all of our footage.
Oh, it's great. So like, what's some of the responsibilities that you have there? Like, describe those roles a little bit for us.
So my job title is Predator.
Really?
Which is so fun to tell people. It's a contraction of producer-editor. It's actually...
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
It's actually an industry standard term.
It's not like the 3 laser beams,
Not yet. Or like the criminal thing, which people don't like either.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think of that. I was thinking the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that would be a much worse connotation.
Exactly. But really, I mean, that job title gives me so much flexibility in what I get to do every day, because at any local PBS, aside from your big ones that are in like New York and Boston and California, you usually have a very small team working on a lot of different programming and always trying to experiment and trying to do something different and find their niche within that community. So a lot of what I do is I came in from Temple, and I was a shooter at Temple, I was an editor, so I kind of got pushed onto the creative stuff pretty quickly, which is really nice for me. So a lot of what I do is I'm producing stuff in the studio, so I'm helping set up the set for the weekly shows that we tape in the studio. I'm helping edit a lot of the weekly shows, getting them to captions, getting them to master control, getting them to time, making sure they're all QC'd and ready for air. And then
what is QC? I always hear
quality control.
Oh, okay.
QC is quality control. So that's making sure you got no black frames in there. You have no jump cuts. You have no weird audio hiccups, anything like that. It's watching a fun talk show from start to finish.
Yeah. So
intently.
You get to literally like watch the entire show beforehand.
You have to.
And make sure that there's nothing wrong with it.
You have to make sure all the lower thirds are done. And it's for these simple shows. It's for like a 1-person talk show for a half hour.
Yeah. Okay.
Still takes a while to get it done because you have to make sure that it's ready for air. So like a lot of my work is centered around that, but the stuff that I really enjoy doing is shooting for our news program there, which, we get to shoot a lot of personal stories, a lot of human interest and investigative stories. And, I've gotten really lucky in that workplace to have a lot of freedom in shooting those stories. And, I lean more towards a documentary approach. So I like to kind of shoot things like that. And then, as a PBS station, we also have the freedom to explore long form content a lot. And so
you've worked on some of their longer pieces. You've produced some of them too.
I've produced a fair amount of them. Yeah. The big one that I produced was that you were literally a savior on last summer.
Oh, nice.
Was the soccer thing that we did.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that was awesome.
That was basically in 2 months. Stefan and I shot a 30-minute documentary. It was like April to June, to late June.
Yeah, that was a little mini marathon there.
Yeah, and that was like just exploring the history of American soccer in Bethlehem, because it has this weird history that's interwoven with the Steel Corporation and the capitalism that was engulfed in that community. There's this whole other thread of workers' rights and labor rights that all went into like basically Bethlehem, Pennsylvania having the best soccer team in the history of the United States.
Yeah.
They're still the most winningest team.
What was their record?
They were like 116-6.
That's insane.
Or
that's
something,
incredible.
and like 2 ties or something like that.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And this was Bethlehem Steel's team. Was it called Bethlehem Steel?
Yeah, the Bethlehem Steel Football Club.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah.
This is like early 1900s, so like 1910s to late 20s.
There's going to be a link in like a little pop-up thing up there if you want to click on that. If you want to watch that documentary, there's a link to it up there.
Yeah.
If not, is it on YouTube or is it on?
It's on our website.
Okay, it's on the website.
It might be on YouTube as well.
That means it'll be down in the description.
Perfect.
So definitely go check that out. That was a really cool documentary to work on. There's a couple of shots in there that they're mine. So it's cool.
You brought your little slider your giblet, and we were rocking and rolling.
That was a lot of fun. I think there's some photos on Instagram of that thing.
Yeah, I think your like profile photo I took when we were
That's right.
out on a field. We were shooting the field at Moravian College is the field that the team used to play on.
Yeah.
So, one day we just went out. It was like 90 degrees or something like that.
It was beautiful
We were dripping.
So sweaty, but
just
it was
running up and down
sun.
the grandstand. Yeah.
Great clouds that day too.
What'd you say?
Great clouds.
Oh, it was a beautiful day.
Very dramatic.
And we had cheesesteaks for lunch.
Oh, it was perfect.
Like good men.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of my work has been centered, I try to work on these long form projects because that's really what I want to do at the end of the day. That's where I feel a lot of passion in, in storytelling, in production. And I just feel like a lot of things deserve more than a minute and 30 seconds, which is like what you see on the evening news and why I'm so lucky to work in a workplace that allows me to do that.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of more freedom in like the storytelling area, and that's one of your big focuses.
Correct.
When as always, when we do these podcasts, we come up with a list beforehand. So Dan and I were talking about like where he got started and all this stuff, and storytelling was a really big part of that. So let's kind of go back to your roots for a minute there. And you're actually not from the area originally.
No, I'm a transplant.
Where are you from?
I am from your neck of the woods. I am born and raised in a town called Cumberland, Maine, which is about 15, 20 minutes north of Portland, which is about the southernmost city hotspot of the state. About from my house growing up, about 3 hours to the border, I would say.
Gotcha.
So, but like once you get an hour and a half north of where I grew up, it's hermit land and town 29 with 15 people living in it, like that kind of thing. So, but I had my background, or like my upbringing at least, was like it was nothing like that. I mean, we lived in a nice like suburban neighborhood. Like it was small. I graduated high school. This is how I gauge how big my town was. I graduated with 150 people.
Okay, yeah.
So I don't know if that's like big or small compared to you.
I mean, I was 180 at Northwestern.
So
but
probably
we were kind of in the country area.
Yeah.
So we were a little bit more secluded.
Right. So I mean, that's been the a lot of my family has moved up to Maine in the last like 20 years or so, which has been really cool. Okay. It's kind of funny because you grow up there and you're in the middle of it and you're like, this is dumb. I have nothing to do. Like, I can't go to the movies or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's a really nice place to live.
Yeah.
It is.
I've heard that from a lot of people. It's beautiful up there, but then there's also like older architecture and more colonial style and
all colonial style. Yeah. Beautiful. It's really, really nice. And it's so much locally focused, so much local ag, so many like majority of the businesses are local businesses there.
Wow.
And it's such a good place to have a business there. That's how my parents got there. My mom and dad owned a kite shop and a toy store.
Oh, cool.
In the Old Port, which is like the big hub in Portland, where cobblestone streets and breweries and restaurants, and it's right on the wharf there. And they owned that business for about 15, 18 years.
Wow.
And called it Northern Sky Toys with a Z.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was just ingrained in that kind of Portland community.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you were saying like that kind of small town vibe, part of your upbringing was based, you were saying, in like vocal storytelling.
Yes.
Where people were very, tight community. You'd sit down and you'd tell each other stories.
Yeah.
And that's where that storytelling kind of I don't know, that urge
the itch
for you. The itch.
The itch.
That's a good way to
or
put
just
it.
The curiosity, I guess. I mean, what we were talking about earlier is that we grew up without like cable TV. So all we had was like PBS and like the local news.
Shout out PBS.
Shout out PBS. So that's really all we had. But I was a huge sports fan as a kid. But there was no way for me to watch the games. And I was a huge baseball fan.
Gotcha.
And the Red Sox play every night. Like I wanted to watch the Red Sox every night, but I couldn't.
Okay.
And so for me, the first introduction to any sort of like media or broadcast or anything like that was I would listen to the Red Sox games every single night on the radio.
Okay.
Just sitting on my bed, or if we were driving, we'd listen in the car. And, I would not even know what these players looked like or what the fields looked like or anything like that. As the internet grew, I obviously like figured it out and stuff. But at the beginning, like it's just raw storytelling.
Yeah, you're just listening to someone tell what's going on.
You have two guys in the broadcast booth and the ambient sound from the stadium, and you're painting a whole picture of what's happening.
Geez.
And that was like my first introduction to like, I guess, being gripped by that.
Yeah, being able to like visualize and come up with your own sort of mental version of what's going on.
Of course. And it held such a value in my life too at the time. I'm like, sports are they're fine. They're great. I love them still. But like at that point in your life where like sports are like everything, and you know, I kind of was that standard kind of kid that just loves sports. Like it was a huge part of my life.
Yeah. Okay.
I grew up and like that was where I found a lot of entertainment from.
Gotcha.
And so like just listening to that and having those voices and knowing these players and like knowing every single stat because you're listening every night.
Yeah.
It just gets ingrained in you.
And there's got to be like a language to it too. Like I find storytellers, they tend to have a better vocabulary. They tend to be able to carry you across a storyline and keep you interested throughout.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there are times where I start telling stories and I see people kind of just like glaze over a little bit. And I'm like, no, I gotta get to the point. Okay.
You gotta rail it back a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an art in it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So that's where that sort of started for you.
That's the thing I can pinpoint. I think I would say like that's something that I can like easily say was, my first delve into thinking that was like really cool.
Gotcha.
And thinking that was something that like, as I said before, like I just held a lot of value in it.
Yeah. And you said that when we were talking, the next sort of point of the focal point that you see as getting really into the creative part of your life was when you started going to temple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just think the story's funny because I'm, small town in Maine, and I really am the only one in my family up to this point that's jumped ship. I'm the only one that left after high school.
That's right.
I have two younger brothers, and they both stayed.
Gotcha.
So
you're the only one that made it out of Maine.
As of this point, my brother's done like summer stuff, like gone to different countries over the summer, but like for the most part, like everyone's always lived in Maine. And for me, it was I kind of wish I had journaled at the time, but like, there was just this desire for me to like see what else more was out there.
Oh yeah.
And explore something different. And for some reason, even though we hadn't visited them that often, I just had this desire to live in a city. And I can't pinpoint, like, I think it was because I basically never had it.
Yeah, I totally understand that feeling. Like I grew up in Allentown for maybe the first 5 years of my life, but I don't really remember that. I've got one of those memories. But then most of my childhood was spent out in Neutropolis, so we're out in the country, and kind of living out in a secluded area like that, having like a group of people that they're like homogenous. That's the word that I was looking for. Like it's a fairly sterile group.
You can say whitewashed.
Yeah. It's pretty whitewashed.
Yeah.
So living in that area, I was just like, okay, there's gotta be more out there. I have dual citizenship, so you know what? I'm going to school in Canada.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have a plan or anything like that, and I just kind of went for it. Mm-hmm. And going into a different community like that, I've had a bunch of friends talk about, like guests on the podcast, talk about making a big leap like that. And that can be like a big turning point in like a creative person's life. And
completely.
Was that kind of the case with you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, from the first day I got to Temple, I was around people that I had never hung out with before. Like people from all over the world, frankly.
Gotcha.
That I would, was never used to seeing in my day-to-day life, people I was not used to interacting with. And like, it was such a good experience to be able to like have that and be immersed in that, especially during like those formative, like 18 to 22 years.
Yeah.
Where you're like really starting to figure things out.
Yeah.
And like, you're kind of like, you're teetering on the edge of like, I can do this alone, but like not yet. And then like, just figuring all that stuff out is so important.
Yeah, that's really important, especially when you're coming from like a more secluded society.
Right.
Where like you have to experience the way that other people were brought up a little bit. And that gives you just so much more perspective.
I think so. And like you also, if you want to tie it back to the storyteller thing, like, you realize like where people come from so many different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
And people have experienced so many more wildly different things that I have. And like I fit into that puzzle. Like I have my own experience, but like there's also all of these different people that, just have things in their lives that shape them to be the way that they are.
Yeah. And seeing the way that different experiences shape people differently. Like you might have had the exact same experience as someone, like something very similar, and it could change you in very different ways. Completely.
Yeah. So that was a big spark for me. But like, even coming out of high school, like I didn't really know what I wanted to like do per se. I wasn't like, I'm going to be a doctor or I'm going to be, work in government or anything like that. Like it was very, I was into theater, and so I knew I was like good at communicating, and I knew that I was like good on stage and in front of people, and I knew that like I just wanted to be in some sort of realm where I could use that. So I just entered as like a straight up comm major.
Interesting.
Which doesn't mean that much. At Temple. And literally, dude, like it was orientation day even.
Oh wow.
Where we had to like go and pick our first classes.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there, I was like, fuck, like I don't know what I want to do. like I was like, I like all these look cool. And one of the advisors came over and she was like, well, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, at the time I was like really into radio, as I said, and like into podcasts and like into like news magazine stuff. And I was like, well, I think it'd be like really like cool to do radio. And she was like, okay, choose media studies and production.
Gotcha.
And that was the major that I chose on orientation day and never split after that. Production track too.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was like something that I never intended to do, and never, never intended that I would be like, I'm going to go to Temple as a media studies major. Like,
yeah, like that wasn't the initial goal, but
not at all.
It brought you right in.
And
so like what sort of like courses did they have you in, and like what sort of experiences did they have you go through there?
Off the bat, it's like your pretty basic kind of undergrad United States experience where you take a couple core classes and you take some gen eds. I was lucky that I did like a lot of AP classes in high school, so I didn't have to like do all of the gen eds and stuff, but like it's a lot of media theory, which was also really interesting for me too, coming from like not an urban place and not like a city, like how to look at the media, how you critique the media, what is it trying to tell you, how can you digest this, how can you be better at it, how has it been done for decades,
like how to be creative in a field that expects a standard, things like that,
and like learning how like to recognize like biases, and learning how to recognize like we had this crazy professor freshman year, Dr. Barry Vacker, and he was like just this crazy gifted, talented media theorist.
Gotcha.
And he wrote a book about it, like just the way that he looked at our screens and like the role of computers and AI and like all of these things, like completely shaping everyday life. So that was like a lot of like what we learned freshman year was like that media theory stuff. The flip side of it,
content.
It is heavy content. Yeah. It's interesting. The flip side of it is a lot of my friends that those are people that I just like kind of walked into the dorms with. They started doing the Temple news program, like the Temple television news program at Temple, which was really big for me. Yeah. And that was like where I found my first group of friends. That was my first time ever being in a TV studio, holding a camera, setting a light, punching stuff on a board. And that was like my first introduction to TV. And it was like my friends were there and I liked it and I found value in it again. It was like kind of that full circle thing. And like I just kind of stuck with it.
Gotcha.
And it just all devolved from there. It was like I would help out on like these little shows that they have, and then I started working for like the big show that they did once a week, and then I started like being a reporter, and I started going out and reporting my own stories, and I started going out and shooting with people. I started working on the sets, and I started like working on the shows, like building a rundown for a news show. Like these were things that I was never told in high school was a feasible career path, and we weren't big enough to have a TV studio in our high school or anything like that. But it was just one of those things that it was something I think maybe it was really new. Maybe that's why I gravitated to it so much.
Interesting,
But I also like kept tying back to the fact that it's important, and I think like it's always been a challenge for me, and I think like that's where I derived like a lot of that experience from. And I was like just kept doing it, and internships led to part-time jobs, led to more internships, and you just like kind of go down the rabbit hole there.
Yeah, so like after graduation you started getting more into like it just sort of spiraled from there.
Yeah.
Like you're getting a variety of different like gigs and stuff like that. You said you were doing internships at places. Like, are there any kind of like stick out ones that you want to mention?
Yeah, my big internship, which really like cemented like I want to be in this field, was I did 2 internships like back to back. I was there for like 8 months at NBC 10, which is the NBC affiliate in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Obviously any major news network in a major city is going to have a huge presence and a huge history there, which they did. And so I was an intern on their digital side.
Okay.
But their digital side encompassed these long form projects that were basically like documentaries, like kind of more newsy documentaries, less I forget what word did you say earlier?
Like less narrative content, but
yeah, more of like a news structured documentary.
Yeah,
but they were all based around like social justice issues, which is something that I'm very passionate about and something that I'm always going to be passionate about. And the first thing that I got to work on there was they were doing a documentary on suicide stigma.
Oh, wow.
And suicide prevention, which has never been covered before.
Yeah.
Never been tackled by
It's
any
a very
major
undercovered subject,
news organization. And so the whole documentary was basically exploring, the experiences of people that have tried and lived through it, and people that have lost people that are experts in the field and trying to communicate, this is how you talk about this is how you approach people about this.
Oh, wow.
And it's, it's something that's sadly been in my life before, which is not fun. And so like that was the first thing where I was like, wow, like I'm doing super impact driven work and it's possible to do that. And that was a completely like switch from me from doing these like 90-second news packages or going out and shooting like a 20-second video to put on the news for Temple. Like this was like deep, driven, heartbreaking, compelling storytelling that I was doing at like age 20 in college.
Jesus.
And it's like, it was just this crazy thing that I fell into.
Yeah.
And like, I was good at it. And like they were using, like I was doing these cuts for digital essentially. I was creating these like the 6-minute vignettes, profiles type of thing that would go on like the digital platform. And I really, really was like digging into it. And I was, my first cuts were bad and then they got better and they started like giving me feedback and stuff like that. And they ended up like on half of them just ripped what I took and put it in the doc.
Wow.
And for me, that was huge.
Yeah.
Because that was like
fantastic.
A huge validation for me that like I could belong in this field and what I was doing was worthwhile. And these people that have been in the field for decades appreciate this.
So not only could you work on like meaningful projects, but you could also have an impact on them at such a young age, like so early in your career.
Yeah. And I think like that's where a lot of people maybe get discouraged by going into this field because they don't have that experience, which is which kind of sucks in some regards. Like I was really lucky that I was in the perfect place at the perfect time with the perfect set of skills that I needed to do that job.
Yeah.
But had I not done everything to get to that point by luck or by intention, there's no telling whether that opportunity would have manifested like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a project that I worked on that was sort of similar. Like it was, when I worked on it, it was eMedia Works did a project, for PBS 39. It was, close to home. Human trafficking was the one that I was a part of.
You can say you won an Emmy for it.
Well, we won an Emmy for it. And it was incredible. Like it was a really intense experience, like to the point that you go out and you shoot these interviews and you get back afterwards and like you sit down and all you can think about is what you just heard, and you also know that probably 60% of what these people say like wouldn't be able to be broadcast just because of like how intense it is. And like the subject matter that they're talking about is heartbreaking. And you're kind of torn apart by it, but at the same time you're like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like this is really powerful stuff, and it gives you that intrinsic fulfillment that's just beyond anything else that I've really experienced.
It's important. I mean, and this is, take it. I mean, maybe it's like the hippy dippy way of looking at it, but like that's why that infrastructure is there for, in my opinion.
Yeah,
is because you're presenting these issues and these problems and these stories in a very like raw fashion, I guess you would say.
Absolutely.
And with these projects, it's not something that you can like really spin. Like it's not like like you do freelance work. It's not like a corporate video where you kind of like make them say these things and you can switch it around after and like take some stuff out to make it like really, really be perfect. Like you have to do this stuff justice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's such a challenge at the same time.
It is. Yeah. It's such a balance between like what can actually be broadcast on television and like still being true to the story and true to the people and sharing what they're trying to get across.
Yeah.
in what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Like, so not completely ignoring their message that they're trying to give off, but including it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's hard to weave those things together, but that's what you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's like narrative. I agree with you. Narrative documentary work is like, it's really powerful. There's something about it that's, first of all, you can tell a greater story over a broader scope, but you can also hit subjects that I think are just like, they're hard for people to talk about.
Yeah.
But as soon as you're doing it, like, hey, we're making a documentary on X, like people will, oh, okay, like this is my chance to talk about this. And it gets people to open up.
I also think that it's important because some things you can't encapsulate in a news story. And I think that, you know, working in local news and like interning and now working for like a local station, like I do think they do a really good job.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really do. But there are some things that just deserve more time.
Yeah.
And, you know, the only way to do that is to like really dive into it.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that documentary turned out to be like 45 minutes, probably could have been an hour and a half if we had the time and kept doing it and everything like that. And that's just like kind of how it goes sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that the Close to Home series is actually like a series like that. And PBS has been instrumental in making that happen. But it's one of those things that like, I love ongoing content for that reason. And especially when it's like big blocks like that, like 45-minute documentaries or half-hour documentaries, and they're going to make several on like similar subjects or even the same subject. But it's just, it's cool to see media going in a direction where those are rewarded. People pay attention to them, and you know, they earn awards too. Like it's important, and people are recognized for it. Yeah. That's huge.
It definitely is. That was a huge, so like, you know, that was a huge experience for me in just really cementing for myself that like this kind of work is like, you know, maybe I won't do it right away and be just, you know, because there's money and you have to think about living and, you know, you're a guy right out of college, but like at the end of the day, like that's the work that I connect with. Yeah. And that's the work that I feel holds the most value.
You said a really good term when we were coming up with our list here. Is this sort of the point when you started getting into journalism with a capital J?
Yeah, maybe. I guess you'd call it that.
I love the way that you said that. It's important.
It's important. And it's like taking that craft and that duty, I guess you'd say, that's like, you know, been around since newspapers have been around. Yeah. You know, and it's just changed so drastically in like the last like 25 years that yeah, like that type of work like is still really important. Like you need journalists, like you need people that are going to like find people to tell their story. You need people that are going to like look into what's happening and stuff like that.
And be passionate about it too.
Yeah, and like want to dive into that stuff and like know why it's important.
So this was at NBC that you did this documentary, right?
Yeah, this was my junior year of college.
Okay. So you mentioned in our you know lead up to this that around that time was when you really started to figure out different styles of production. NBC was finding narrative documentaries, and then after your internship, did you go to PBS right afterwards?
No, so I still had one more year of college left. Okay, so I was finishing up my internship there as I was going into my senior year, and then throughout, I mean, senior year was probably like the busiest year I've ever had in my life. I just took on too much. It was just one of those things where you just take on too much. I worked like 35 hours a week at NBC Sports Philadelphia. Jesus. Digital team there. So that was like cutting the highlights for like the Sixers games and the Flyers games and working on like digital originals and, you know, like kind of fun, cool sports videos. Nice. But I was basically like, you know, the nights that I was there, I did an internship there my sophomore year, which is why I like was able to move back there as a part-timer. Oh, but like, you know, a lot of times it was just like me alone at night, like running the video department at night, making sure stuff got on the website and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was like, I was a balance between that. And then it was a balance between, I was then producing the news show that Temple had. So like, it was me organizing a bunch of college kids to go out and shoot video during the week and find stories and help me produce a show and writing all the scripts and stacking the show. And like, this is like under the supervision of a Temple professor who was the EP at 6ABC for 35 years. So it's like, it wasn't a joke either.
Yeah, they have standards and you had to meet
this guy took it seriously. Yeah. So, you know, there's just that that you have to do throughout the entire week. And then, you add class schedule onto that.
That's a lot of
You
responsibility.
add being friends with people.
And you were doing full-time school at the time, right?
Yeah, 12, 15 credits probably.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, on top of that.
That's
I mean,
insane.
at that point, it was like whatever classes I wanted. So I wasn't breezing through them, but like they were classes that I wanted to take.
See, one of the big reasons that I got into freelancing is because I was doing school full-time.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna be able to like deliver at a part-time job right now. It's just not going to happen. I'm way too inundated. So, you know what? I'm just going to try and do like freelance gigs here and there. And like, that's how I got into that. But man, so much respect to you for being able to go through part-time work, full-time school, and producing a news show for the college at the same time. That's intense.
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, it caught up to me too. Like at the end of that semester, I was burnt out and it was a lot. And it was, I have this visceral memory of like when I was in that really stressful state of like not being a fun person to be around. Like when I'm stressed and I'm like, this has got to get done. This has got to get done. Like I'm very short. Yeah. And that like rubbed off.
But it kind of teaches you your boundaries in that too, where it's like, all right, there's too much stress going on. I need to start cutting things out, or else I'm going to get like this again.
It was a complete learning experience. It was like learning like what's the breaking point, and like getting to that point where like it's still life at the end of the day. Like you have to be able to like be with your friends, and you have to be able to like enjoy these experiences and stuff.
Gosh.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge, but I mean. I've always said that that's what college is there for.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's like it's there to just like figure it out.
Yeah,
and that's like about it.
Yeah, you just get thrown to the fire and you gotta work it out.
You just claw your way out. Yeah. So that was like kind of how I wrapped up Temple. I was lucky in the fact that I got the job at PBS like graduation week.
Nice.
So I was I was graduated and I had the job.
Yeah,
and I moved out here like 3 weeks later.
That's fantastic.
Post graduation. Yeah,
that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
So when you started working at PBS, that was when you started to like really get into larger scale production, you were saying, which kind of surprised me because I feel like NBC would be, big giant productions and all this stuff, but I guess they're more mobile because they have to
they're news
produce constant.
Yeah. I mean, and they are in a sense, but like I was also just an editor. Like I never sat in on shoots.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you weren't on the production side at all there.
I was just watching these like hour and a half heartbreaking interviews, but never, I was never on set.
Yeah.
I was never, I went out in the field for like one shoot.
Yeah.
As like, here's an intern shoot. Sign your intern paper so you can go on the intern shoot.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's what it was.
Okay.
So like, I was never around what I am at PBS now, which is like, I get to PBS and like, they have good quality cameras, like Sony FS7s with different lenses you can put on it.
Oh yeah, boy.
Yeah. You love them FS7s.
Gotta love that. We got the baby brother, the FS5 over there.
the teenage dream of the FS7. Yeah.
I'm going to be a filmmaker, Dad.
One day. So like, you get there and you now all of a sudden, like I have these new cameras. I have multiple lights I can use instead of just one light that I was using the entire time at Temple. And like, I learned so quickly, like to get onto that like upper echelon a little bit more.
Yeah. So like you had to catch up again.
Oh, definitely. Okay. It was a complete learning experience again because like, I'm a pretty quick learner, but all of a sudden I was in a space with, the other photographers there that have been shooting their entire lives.
Right.
And, I'm just this kid strolling in there, for better or for worse. Yeah. But like, so like slowly, like you learn like how to better light something, how to manipulate the settings on a camera to make something look better. What's the standard? Like what can you afford to take the time on? What can you not afford to take the time on?
Right.
All of these different things started to happen, essentially. It's things that I didn't have at my disposal when I was at Temple, because it's college gear.
Yeah, and also like being put under like deadline pressure too, of like knowing, all right, I'm gonna have to shoot this today, and then I have so long, like maybe it's like a day turn or something like that. Like those are pressure cooker situations.
Yep.
Where you got to shoot something and then you got to edit it and you got to get it out by 4 p.m. that night or
something like that.
Yeah.
Luckily, I haven't been in too many situations like that at PBS because a lot of the work is like the first show I was working on when I got there was a show we did called Let's Go, which I don't know if you ever worked on that. But that was basically like a fun, it was like a variety show around the Lehigh Valley. So it was like local businesses, local attractions, local vendors, that kind of thing.
That's with Grover Silcox.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it? Yeah.
The legendary.
I shot
the legendary Grover
absolute,
Silcox.
Yeah, he's a dream.
He's a
guy.
dream. He's just
love
the best.
Grover. Yeah,
Grover.
Fantastic.
Love
Grover.
you, Grover.
I shot with him once at the Social Still for Let's Go. I think it was one of the last episodes that were shot, and it was so much fun because like you got to just go and explore a place and experience like what they do.
Right.
Social Still, by the way, in their brewing room where they have all the things going on. If you're shooting in there and the door is closed, the air is it's probably like 15%. In the air, like
perfect. You're fumigated
getting
in there.
a little buzz going.
Yeah.
You're getting some nice smooth footage.
That's very nice.
It was a lot of fun.
That sounds great. You just lock yourself in there for a little while.
Yeah, I came out and I was like, guys, something's wrong.
It's better than when we've gone to like vineyards with Grover.
Oh.
And we've just had like, he's got to sample the wine.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? You're not gonna spit it out. You're not
gonna spit it out. Come on now. It's part of television.
Yeah. Oh man. I'll in the name of a good story.
In the name of a good story. Yeah. So luckily, like a lot of my experience was like I was turning these 3 to 4 minute packages like in a couple days, or I'd be like working on 3 of them at once.
Gotcha.
Getting them to like our lead editor who got them into the show. And then, there was a whole like workflow, which also is something I'd never been a part of.
Right. Okay.
Like at Temple, it's like throw it to the wind and see what happens. But like, when you get to like a real place, it's like, it was cool to feel like a part of a workflow.
Like someone's passing off to you.
It's such a
pass on to
simple
someone
thing,
else.
but it was just like that was like another one of those new things that I had to learn.
And that's important for people being able to specialize too. So like once you're supported in that way by other people in other roles, when you go to shoot something, you can be a shooter as opposed to a shooter producer and wrangling the talent and X, Y, and Z. So it gave you the chance to sort of focus and hone in on those basics and really nail your stuff down.
Yes, definitely. And, I think that, a lot of the time that I spent in college was like, you're not working on the best cameras in the world and you're not really like taught how to use them and like how a camera works and stuff.
Right.
So at Temple, it was like, you would just go out and do it and like, you'd look at it and just hope it came back okay.
Right.
And that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And now it was, I was learning these things that are now like second nature to me.
Right.
So I was learning like what white balance actually means.
Yeah.
I was learning and how to manipulate that in a room. I was learning how to light a set so that you wouldn't see the lights, but then made everything look like a little more dramatic. Like I was learning how to like manipulate the iris to get more depth of field. Like all of these like little things that I literally do every single day now.
Yeah.
Were like all things that I had to learn.
Yeah,
when I first got there.
Like they feel like fairly complicated concepts when you first step up to them.
Yes.
But as soon as you've gone through that like 15th, 20th shoot, you're like, okay, well I have to do X, Y, Z, bada, 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 format the card, set up the white balance, set up some lights, do the, you just go through the checklist at
completely.
That point.
Yeah.
So that then gave you some more room to focus on like creativity and breaking out a little bit with doing different things with editing and even experimenting with production a little bit.
Yeah. That's been the coolest part of my job is that I'm one of I would say I'm the only person there that can like do all three.
Yeah.
Aside from our director of production, Javier, who's like been in the business for a very long time. Yeah. Like I'm one of the only
shout out Javi.
I'm one of the only people there that like can do all three on like any given day. Like that is my job, is to be available to do all of those things at a high
floater.
Yeah, production floater. Exactly. So like, everything that I do, it's all tying into each other. Like as I'm shooting, I'm editing into my head. As I'm in the edit booth, I'm thinking about what I need to get this time. As I'm producing on set, I'm thinking about how the best way I can like set up a shot or set up an interview. Like all of these things are now like connected.
Okay.
Which is a really cool thing to like have as a creative and have as someone who like never thought that they would really be in this field to begin with.
Gotcha. Yeah. Like that wasn't something that, you're trying to analyze in content as you're growing up. Like it was just sort of absorbing into you. And now you're finally at the point where like it's been trained into you. You've got the experience to do it. And now you have this like sort of muscle memory of it almost.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel that I'm at a point now where like learning new stuff is not as daunting as it used to be.
Right. It's more experimentation and like you're getting to like add flavor to things now.
Definitely.
Gotcha.
I definitely think I have a style that I shoot in, and I think that for the most part, like a lot of the work that I do there is everything is extremely contingent on all the other things that I do.
Right. They all balance each other.
Yeah. And frankly, like I don't love it when I have to go out and shoot something and then I can't edit it.
Yeah.
Because when I'm out there, I'm shooting stuff the way that I want to edit it.
Yeah.
And then I have to kind of like reel myself back sometimes and think like, okay, like the reporter is going to edit this. Like we've got to get on the same page and make sure like we get what they want and that sort of thing.
That was a major learning curve for me, actually. Like, I'm still on the curve, but figuring out like, even between individual reporters, like how they're going to use the footage, how they're going to edit it, what they're going to do in the edits, and what I need to compensate for now, or like what I can do to make their jobs easier. And there are still times where like I trip myself up and I realize like, okay, no, I'm not going to shoot this whole thing in like a cine profile because they might not have the time to do a big color correction. Let's get the color correction and everything right in camera. And that can be huge. But yeah, like learning those basics is really important. And like, I'm still going through it. So I would love to hear your breakdown on some of these things.
My breakdown. Who am I?
We got
Where we start? We
start
starting on shooting?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about shooting. We're going to talk about editing and producing, and we've got just about like 4 bullet points from each.
Cool.
So these are Dan's tips.
These are Dan's trusty tips for being a 23-year-old photographer, because I know it all already.
Well, I mean, dude, you're crushing it at PBS. Like I whenever I go on shoots with you, like I always trust the situation. I don't feel like I need to control things because I know that you have it under control.
Thanks for calling me very controlling. No, but I appreciate. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, like it's the best version of that. It's not being like overly controlling. It's having the situation under control and making sure that nothing's going to get out of hand.
Because we now sit in a diner every Wednesday for about 5 hours.
Yeah, that's very true.
And just Grover.
Grover's talking stories.
And whoever Grover wants to bring in that day, we got to just be able to do it together. Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible. We hear some wild stories, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely some good ones.
So, tips.
Yes.
Basics for shooters. So these are camera operators, cinematographers, videographers, all that stuff.
I think the first thing that really improved my shooting was like really, really understanding the camera that I had.
Yeah.
Being able to do everything that iris, white balance, shutter speed, slow motion, gain, formatting a card, what you mentioned before.
Yeah.
All of those things, like at this point, I can basically do without looking at the camera.
Right. Yeah. You know where the buttons are.
I know where the buttons are. I know how many presses it is to get to each one. I have like my slow-mo mode set up exactly the way I want it, so I can like pop it in and pop it out. All of those things I think was like probably the most important thing for me.
So like learning all your settings and all your gear.
It's so important. And this is like, it seems so rudimentary.
Right.
But like it is. And it's like, being from a college setting where you're getting different gear every time.
Yeah.
And some of it may work and some of it doesn't work. Like knowing what you have and like being able to use it every single time and fully understand what it's able to do and how you can use it is wildly important. So that would be like the first thing that at least like I always look towards, is like making sure I know exactly what I have and how to use it. And, And then
you mentioned there was we had another point on here that was good interview setup, which that was like in my schooling, like I did digital cinematography at Full Sail. One of the biggest things that they talked about when it came to like lighting courses was lighting interviews. We drilled that again and again and again.
We did not.
Oh, okay.
And,
all right.
And it wasn't like for any lack of professors or stuff like that. Like it just was like a lot of the time you didn't really like have the time or resources to like do it for the most part. We rarely had a light whenever we went out on shoots and stuff.
Gotcha.
So a lot of it really is just like shot in the dark. But, for interview setups, like, that can really set the tone for a lot of a shoot.
Absolutely.
In my opinion. And maybe sometimes more than I need to, but like a lot of the times I will take a lot of time setting up an interview shot.
Yeah.
Making sure that, it all looks good, and knowing that if I don't have the B-roll that I need, that this can stand alone. That I'm not going to be sitting there wishing another shot would pop up on the screen, that I'm enjoying looking at that interview shot, enjoying looking at that person's face, and like having at least it look very appealing.
That Bethlehem Steel soccer doc that you did is a great example of that. Excuse me. I remember working on the one setup with you where we had two FS7s, and then was it we had like an A6500, like a little boy camera
on your slider.
On that slider. And I remember like the detail that we went into. We're like, all right, we're going to move the slider to the end. We're going to check that shot. We're going to move the slider to the other end. We're going to check that shot. We're going to get our parameters just right. We're going to make sure our other cameras have some room to move. This is going to be our static. This is going to be, the one that you're manning. I'm going to watch over this one. Everyone had their roles, and lighting was huge. That was like we had, what was it? Was it 3-point lighting setup?
I usually try and do 3. We usually had 2 1x1 panels.
Yeah, so like the Astros?
The Astros, the 1 foot by 1 foot panels.
Gotcha.
We'd usually key and fill with those, and then we have a set of eye cans that we would pop up and use that as a backlight. Or sometimes I'll try and use like a natural backlight if there's like a lamp back there.
Yeah.
Or if there's like some sort of thing that lights up behind them.
Yeah, like some sort of practical to use.
Yeah, something like that. But for the most part, like, I don't know, maybe I'm too intricate with it, but like for me, it's, it just sets the tone. And
absolutely, yeah.
I think like it's a very like good indicator of like production quality. Yeah. Especially like in the documentary space.
Well, I think about like cinema. Lighting is a huge part of it. Like there's a whole genre, like film noir is like all about lighting, how you put things in shadow, how you use shadow and all that stuff. So, that's an art where lighting really determines the mood in the shot. Mm-hmm. If you add a tinge of green, suddenly it just feels a little bit sick. You know, you can add some nice warm orange light, and suddenly it feels all warm and sunny and happy.
I'll tell you a good story. We were on a shoot last week when we were in Philadelphia for that 2-day shoot. Yeah, and we have these things at the station called uplights, which are basically like little, like I would say probably like 8-inch by 8-inch lights that like change color, and you can set like the different. You can mix colors together. You can set the intensity of each one. Right. And we just like threw them in the van because we're like, maybe we could use them. The interview space that we had when we got to the University of Pennsylvania was like barren. It was like nothing. Geez. The only thing that we had to make it interesting was like making these uplights and like splashing them on the wall and like using them as backlights and stuff like that.
Splashes of color.
Like that. Yeah. Like we were doing a thing on space. Blue backlight. Perfect.
Yeah.
Stuff like that can save you.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So, but I think what you were saying about like lighting is that's like the other thing that I always look at is like, shooting in a space with a lot of windows, like, no, thank you. Yeah. I'll pass.
You want to be able to control your light. Like, I was given some really good advice when it comes to lighting interviews. My brother-in-law, Matt Lewis, he's been doing a whole bunch of like documentary stuff, and he's fantastic.
He's really good.
Check out some of his work. I'll have a link down below in the description for, like doc that he's worked on or something like that. But, he told me this kind of routine that he goes through. The first thing that he does is he'll turn off all the lights. He'll try to close all the windows. He'll try to block out as much light as possible, and then just add one light. See how it looks, change it around. Doing controlling your lighting like that, and then moving around one source to see how everything reacts in your room. If you're going to want to use point light or if you're going to want to use soft stuff, just crafting it from the ground up was the term that he used. And that's something that I've tried to stick to since then, if I have time.
Right. That's always the X factor, isn't it? Exactly. Yeah. It's always if you have time. But I'll rearrange a whole conference room. I don't care. Yeah. I'll put all the desks up against the wall just to give them just to have the space. And that's
be able to control that. Yeah.
And that's the other thing is in any interview that I ever shoot, I want them to be a lot of space behind them. Right. I want that. I think it just looks so much better when someone's popping off the screen, and if it's really blurry behind them, great. But I just don't love seeing a ton of detail behind someone.
Yeah. So that comes up to our next point,
and that's just a preference. That's just a way that I like to shoot. It's something that I think looks good, and to me, it looks just a little more refined, I guess.
Yeah. That's that was the next point on our shooting tips actually is depth of field.
Yep.
Like knowing how to use it, knowing how to control it. So like if you're doing a wide shot, you might not want to shoot it at f1.4.
Yep.
Because things are going to fall out of focus really quick.
Yep.
Meanwhile, if you're shooting an interview, you don't want it at f10 because you don't want all the foot traffic or whatever's going on in the background to be distracting you from the subject.
Yep.
So yeah, like separating people from their backgrounds and using depth of field to your advantage.
Yeah. What I basically do is our Sony FS7s we have, which is basically like the standard kit lens that comes with them, is an 18 to 100 millimeter 4.0.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So literally on any interview that I ever do, I open the iris up all the way.
Right.
And I'll still light them. I'll still splash. I'll still key them and fill them and put a backlight on them. And I'll open the iris up all the way.
Right.
And then I'll just use the ND filter
to
just darken it up.
Yeah, because typically if you're shooting wide open and you're using a bunch of lights, it's just going to be totally blown out.
It's going to be totally blown out.
Right. But as soon as you like throw on an ND filter, which is, I think that's huge. Like a lot of people who shoot, I don't think there's enough use of ND. Mm-hmm. Polar Pro has been coming out with some really good options for like their base camp system, which is like fast switching
This is
on
your
lenses.
wheelhouse.
I'm getting to gear weird land. But there's like all kinds of things that are coming out now that are like really good for adding ND to cameras that don't have ND. Like I've a little A6500.
Oh yeah, that's right. We were using that on soccer stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I find that super important. So controlling your depth of field by controlling your light, again, like these things kind of play into each other. And then the next point that you had, this one is huge, and I think it plays into all of the other roles as well, is edit in your head while shooting and creating sequences.
Yep.
You told me about that, and I was like, oh, you can, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And that's just because I have spent so much time in an edit booth and so much time by myself with a half an hour show or a special or something like that and trying to like put all the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times like what I will try and do on a shoot is if I know, the subject is going to be, this is going to be my main interview. This is, either my heartthrob or it's someone that's really important to the story or something like that. Like I will specifically ask questions that I know is going to elicit some sort of hook.
Right.
That's something that can start me off right off the bat, and something that, is really going to grip people.
Yeah.
Because you need that. And then it's even when I'm shooting, like I'm making sure that I'm getting shots in various locations. I'm getting very, very different angles and like very, very different, close-ups and super close-ups and medium shots.
Doing your like wide, medium, tight and getting your sequences and
but
getting
doing
your
that
coverage.
like over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah.
And then also like, popping it into slow-mo and just doing some moves on the floor, doing some walk-arounds of the room and playing with like rack focusing on like the light bulbs and like getting things to like pop and move and that sort of thing. Like all that stuff is like, it's probably a curse, but like that's all I think about when I'm out there is like, can I use this shot? If I'm not going to use the shot, if I don't want to use it, I'm not going to shoot it.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like everything that I shoot, I'm thinking about how could it be used in the final piece?
Gotcha.
How would I actually put this into practice? Why am I even setting up the camera for this? Does this help tell part of the story?
Yeah. That awareness has got to come from working in those different roles too, like shooting a piece and then sitting down and being like, all right, well now I have to edit it.
Yep.
And even like from a production standpoint a little bit. So each one of those you can kind of now use to not necessarily like make your job easier in those other parts, but like make it more coherent and all one linear path.
Yeah. I think each one informs the other one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, and I'm just very, very lucky that I've gotten the opportunity to practice all of those like very consistently, like a lot more consistently than people who I graduated with at my age.
Right.
And that's like such a blessing to be able to like have that opportunity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it helps you really, really understand storytelling, and it helps you like really, really understand what goes into a shoot and what goes into an edit, and like you get the bigger picture a lot quicker, I think.
Yeah,
which is big.
That's super important.
Yeah,
I mean, like when you're producing, like that's what where your awareness has to be.
Yep.
And then that like what you set up in that during pre-production ends up being like a huge part of what you have to do on camera,
Right.
and then what you actually have to put together in editing. And if you're organized throughout, then you're gonna make it much more coherent in the end.
Definitely.
Sweet. So let's move towards editing tips.
Yeah.
We had I just kind of mentioned it right there, but like the next point that you were going to talk about was organization within editing, and that comes into production and camera as well. Like if you're organized and concise in those things, then this portion is going to be a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Specifically when it comes to editing though, like how do you handle organization?
Organization for me typically breaks down into like, if I'm starting a project, you want to talk Avid or Premiere?
Well, I mean, you could go general, you could go specifics. It's whatever you feel
so
comfortable
PBS
with.
is full Avid, which
Right.
Avid is much more of a TV, big workplace, big environment type of thing, because
Yeah.
it really, really works well when you have a lot of people working on different projects.
Yeah,
There's
a
a
bunch
lot
of computers that are all interconnected.
bunch of floating computers,
Right.
bunch of media to be ingested,
Okay.
people having their hands in all sorts of different things. So a lot of what I do is, if I'm working on a big project, everything is organized by the day it's shot. And then
Okay.
everything in that day is organized by the interviews, this type of B-roll, this type of B-roll,
Gotcha.
exteriors, all these different things, graphics, pictures, all under that one umbrella of like the shoot that I did that day.
Right.
And then it all branches out from there. So then, I always think better chronologically.
Right.
That's just how my brain works. That's just how I work better. So like if I'm in a workflow for a long form project,
Yeah.
I can be like, oh, I remember that shoot. I remember every single thing we did that day. Let me
Right.
go back and like find that one point of the day
Yeah.
where I know that we shot that. And
Gotcha.
so that's just been the workflow that's worked for me.
Okay.
And it's like setting up your keyboard so that you have one button that matches back to the video source, having one button that matches
Yeah.
back to the bin that it's in.
Okay.
Like just being able to do stuff really quickly
Yeah.
is, again, a lot of the things we're talking about here, very simple, but like very important.
And very interconnected too. Yeah.
Very interconnected. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So, you were saying, again, interconnected. Organization sort of falls in with a deliberate workflow per style of project.
Yeah.
You were saying that you've gotten to the point where like you have a general workflow for every project, but then within each individual genre, you've come up with, okay, like when I'm doing a news piece, I'm going to do like, there's going to set up the problem. We're going to have a hook. Then we're going to have, someone tells the story and then a solution.
Yep.
Like you have a building process for each project like that.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how have you categorized those?
So I do think of it differently across like all the different styles. If I'm doing one of these like, pump them out talk shows that we do at PBS a lot.
Right, yeah.
A lot of it is like I literally have a template of the show and then I just tighten it up to fit what needs to like get onto air. So that's
Gotcha.
like one workflow where like I know I'm going to put that stuff in, so I already have it laid in a sequence before I even get in there, so I don't have to redo it every single time.
Okay.
So that kind of thing. If I'm working on like let's take the soccer thing.
Right. Okay.
For example, like that was something where there weren't really like any producers working on it. It was really just me and a couple other people on the team we weren't even writing it. We didn't even like transcribe the interviews. Like that was how like
Gotcha.
rushed it was.
Okay. Yeah.
And so a lot of it for me was, I know I have to craft these different sections. I know I have this huge section on the history. How do I tell this history? Well, this one professor is the historian around Lehigh and North Side Bethlehem and South Side Bethlehem.
Yeah.
I know that he has this really good bite about the immigrants coming here. I'd like to start with that because I think that sets the tone.
Okay.
And then it's just working chronologically forward from there.
Yeah.
This guy says this here. I would drop down like basically like 5 minutes worth of bites about a certain subject, all back to back to back.
Yeah.
No, I had to cut it down to like 2 or 3 to get the point across, flip-flop them to where I felt they flowed the best, punch that in. Same thing. Moving on to the next thing. Drop down like 5 or 6 minutes worth of content that I know that I'm going to use from these different people.
Okay.
How do these flow together? I'll flip this here. I'll move this here.
Yeah. So you're taking one interview that you did over here, one interview that you did over here, another one over there.
Yep.
And you're organizing by
theme,
like topic.
I think thematically is really how I do edit. These people, like, they all have this bite about this. Okay, well, I don't want them all to say their full thing, but I know they all say it. So let's put them together and let's see how it flows, and let's like chop it down a little bit.
So they all fill in kind of like a different piece of the same topic.
Yeah. Now that's a workflow for something historical.
Yeah.
Because I mean, really, I think that really only works for history.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to literally,
a story.
You're telling a very chronological story because it's history.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but like, if there is like a really like a narrative part, then I also try and work chronologically, but in different ways. So if I'm, if I'm doing a story on, I don't know, like a music program or like an outreach program or like that, like I know I want to start with like visuals and sound and music and like keep it nice, and I want to keep it like fast, and what do I have up front that I know is like really, really good, like short, succinct sound.
Yeah.
And then I can like build off of that from there.
Okay. Yeah. Like I think about that as in terms of like, if I know that I'm shooting a music video, like, all right, there's going to be tons of action shots throughout, but there's also band playthrough material that I need to have. But the thing that's really going to hook people into these videos is going to be like the storyline aspect of it.
Yeah.
So let's have, the drama of the storyline, some chunk of that pop up right away. And then people are like, holy crap, like what's going on? You hook them in with that. And then you start showing band material. It's like, okay, context, and you're explaining the storyline. It sort of flows chronologically from that hook, but per genre, there's a different hook. So every time you go into a different type of media production. Like if you're doing real estate, you're going to start with an establishing shot.
Yep.
You're going to have a wide shot of a property.
The living room ain't going to be first.
Yeah, you're not going to start with, a tight shot inside somewhere. You might show some details and then go to a wide shot, but you generally have the same sort of starting point every time. And as you make more content of those types, you find your style there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I shoot in a very like documentary style.
Gotcha.
Where like I really like shooting like with people. I like following people around.
Yeah.
I really like putting a mic on someone and just letting them do whatever they would do on like a normal day.
I mean, that makes total sense. Like you're very, very much oriented towards like telling the story, whether that's of the person, of the problem that you're talking about, or of the place or something like that. So that ties right into like telling it from their perspective.
Yeah.
You get into your subject very well.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I think that's the heart of anything. And so like this all ties back to like when I'm starting with editing, is like I'll always watch the interview first. I'll never go in and just like, just drop stuff down I'll drop stuff down as I go, but like I have to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I would say like usually every time I'm like, there's my resolution soundbite. I know I want that to be revealed later. I'm going to tuck that away for the end. That's going to be used later. I'm not touching that. How can I build to then get to that point?
Yeah. Okay.
And
you
a lot
find
of
your
it,
climax, and then you find your problem, and it's that storyline.
Yeah, and I think that maybe now that I'm just thinking about it, is like maybe that's like a lot of the way that I try and do things is I identify these key things that I feel are really important.
Okay.
And I know kind of where they fall within this like lineage.
Yeah.
And then I'm filling the gaps.
Interesting.
And I'm filling the gaps to get to a point where it makes sense and it feels right and it tells the right story.
Yeah. That motivation, it shows through in your shooting, your editing, and the way that you produce too. So like it becomes a theme. It becomes your style.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. Yeah. So being deliberate with your workflow can really help hone that individuality that you have, like the perspective from which you're coming from.
And it all just comes from practice too. Like the only reason that I feel like I even have a workflow is because I've gotten the opportunity to do it so many times.
Yeah.
And I'm really like, I keep harping back to it, but like I'm really lucky in that regard that I've like been in a place where like I've been allowed to do that and like been allowed to like take time and like figure out like what works and what doesn't work and like get good feedback from people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's important. And I think that's, when it comes back to like trying to do this stuff for a career, like it so much comes back to like practice.
Yeah.
And it's like, I haven't met anyone that was good at it right away.
Yeah.
No,
same.
never.
Like, I had that weird notion where like I went into film school after being a photographer and doing like music videos every now and then. So I felt like I had sort of like a handle on how to do these things. But going through school, like it really throws you into experiential situations where, like, you know, you have to fill this role. You have to do sound for this project. You have to focus on that thing. So you get to specialize in these different fields, and it teaches you that you don't know that much. But it gives you the experience, and that's where you like really learn in this field. And, you know, having an opportunity like PBS right out of the door from college, like that's huge.
That's huge. Yeah. I mean, just for someone that, you know, wants to kind of find that balance between like creative and journalism.
Yeah.
You know, there's really not a better place to be than somewhere where you like have the opportunity to just do like slightly longer stuff.
Yeah.
And that's like the important part of it is like, I know a lot of my friends graduated from Temple, did the news program, and they moved to these small towns like all over the country to work for like your local NBC station or your local ABC station.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're turning 90-second packages every single day.
Yeah.
And
real
like
fast-paced stuff.
And it's very fast paced. I definitely think there's value in it for communities, and like that stuff like needs to be there. But like I've talked to a lot of them that like, you know, they just don't have the time to dive into really like what they want to do, or like if they have a project that they want to work on for like a really long time, it really is just like rinse and repeat every day.
Yeah, they don't have the opportunity to go out and do those like in-depth parts.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got deliberate workflow per style project. We have organization. These are all under our editing thing. There's gonna be a nice graphic right here. We talked, while I didn't mention the title, we did talk about crafting the story. You know, setting up a hook, conveying the importance of the story, and then resolving that story and being able to do that within, you know, a 90-second piece, a 30-minute piece, or a 45-minute piece. You know, that all that stuff is very important. And then knowing what can be fixed or conveyed is one of our next points on here, which I really like the idea of.
Yeah.
Like there's a sense of obviously creativity to all these pieces. So it's sort of like you're creating a piece of art. You know, you have a very intrinsic tie to what you're creating. But I've always said that like at some point you just sort of have to put it out there.
Yep.
And it's always hard to do that.
You got to unleash it at some point.
Yeah.
You can't tinker forever.
In order to do that, you have to make some concessions.
Yeah.
So like how did you get to that point where you learned that skill?
Yeah, a lot. I'll tie it back to soccer again because we both worked on that. That thing had to be 29 minutes to get it to air. And like there was no way around that.
Like no shorter, no longer.
No shorter, no longer. It had to be 29 minutes.
Wow.
Okay, fine. My rough cut was 38 minutes. And I was sitting watching that rough cut being like, there is not a single thing I want to take out of this. There is not any soundbite in this entire thing that I feel like I can lose and still like tell the story. So like you have to be tough on yourself.
Right.
And you have to know like, you know, does this change? It's just like it's the better of those evils in some situations. And that's just like one example of it. I think like what I was trying to say when we were originally like talking about this was, if you're going into an editing situation
right,
and you know that you have this really, really strong part, like spend the time making that strong and then let the pieces fall in around it. But a lot of the time, like making every single little thing as perfect as it can be on like deadline time is just like not going to work.
Right.
So like knowing what your strongest things are and then building it around that is so important, especially when you're working in TV.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because like you don't want to have shit fall flat.
Exactly.
And that's like, and you know, you don't want to like have stuff like look bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember there was a project that I shot with Megan. I think it was for Tech Takeover.
Yeah.
And we went into this, there was a restaurant that had robots that would serve the food. And I remember we both walked in, we're like, this place is so colorful and like there's lights everywhere. So we really wanted to exemplify that. And everything that we did from there, like we did it with a purpose.
Yeah.
And you know, that gave us like, okay, you know, we can focus on color, we can focus on the beauty of this place and like really exemplify that. So our footage was wide angles and slow motion and like we stuck to that theme and weren't going to try to like, okay, we're going to make it about, you know, the details on the robots because the robots are always moving. We're not going to be able to get in like super tight and, do stuff like that without the robot being like, you're in my way.
Bumping out of me.
Yeah.
Was it, who's the thing at Giant now?
Oh.
Is it Marty?
Yeah, there's some robot at Giant food stores.
I hate him, man.
Doesn't he just tell
he's
people
bumped into me before?
He's like, there's a mess. Someone clean it.
He's like, clean that up. He's literally run into my calf before.
He's like the home monitor.
Yeah, it's and they're everywhere now too.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
When a novelty goes bad, eh?
Oh my God.
With Tech Takeover, that place was really cool.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, a little robot that came up and then a server would actually hand you your food.
Yeah.
But it was just, sweet little novelty.
Neat. It's just the start of the end.
The kids loved it.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. That was a fun piece.
Are they going to love it when that's all the jobs in the next 30 years?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. We're just going to all, do internet work. This is going to be fun.
That?
Yeah, there's another 2 hours.
Yeah. But basically, like, what I was coming to at that point is, like, the best example I can think of is, like, you're doing a few interviews for this one piece, and one interview, like, you think that, like, on paper they're going to be great, and they're a dud.
Yeah.
And they're really not usable. Okay, well, you can't fix that.
Right.
You have to work around that.
Like someone just rambles off.
Yeah, or it's like it's just not succinct, or they're nervous, which happens a lot.
Yeah.
And like you have to figure out a way to showcase the best things.
Right.
And not showcase like, the things that didn't work out so well. So that's I think that's kind of what I meant with like knowing what you can fix and what you can't fix.
Yeah, like where to trim the fat and where to like things that you have to have in, stuff like that. Like knowing what's important, knowing what can be chopped.
Right. Like, if we didn't get enough B-roll for a certain reason, like I can supplement that with like archival or stuff I've shot in the past that I can like put a look on it or that sort of thing. But like stuff that I can't fix is like, not having like the best sound from that person.
Yeah.
So I have to like really identify, this person was strong. I'm going to have to focus it around this person, what they say.
Yeah.
And I don't want to change the heart of the story, but I'm going to have to, deviate a lot from what I originally thought and go from a lot more of what this person is saying instead.
Yeah. So it's being flexible in a way.
Completely. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then you know what? That brings us to our next list. It's all about producing. These are Dan's tips for producing, and being flexible is a big part of that. You mentioned we're just gonna go with like two in a row because they really tie in close. Knowing what you want, and then the other one is being open to surprises.
Yep.
So they're kind of not necessarily contradictory, but one is having a clear vision. And the other one is being open to opportunities and the things that might just randomly happen. So like how have you experienced that in your work?
So I think the way that I've experienced that is, for shoots that I'm passionate about, it's like my project. I know I'm taking the lead on it. Mm-hmm. Like before I go somewhere, like I want to find out as much as I can about it. I want to talk to that person on the phone. Yeah. I want to figure out what stuff is there, what we're allowed to see, what we're not allowed to see, where they'd be comfortable showing us and walking with us and doing the interviews. What space do you guys have for interviews? Yeah. So like, and almost like having a pre-production plan before you walk into that space that day.
Yeah.
And like knowing like, okay, well, I'm going to be able to shoot this really cool thing. I can ask that person about that really cool thing in the interview. And there's a strong part of it. Yeah,
because now you have a topic that someone's talking about, and you also have like the supporting B-roll for it, and you know that it's going to be an interesting focal point for the people who are watching.
Of course, yeah, and I think that being able to identify those things and identify how all of those are going to contribute to your end product, like it has to start before you even like leave, in my case, the station.
Yeah.
It has to, especially if it's like, if it's a news shoot and I'm meeting a reporter somewhere, like that's fine. Like that's whatever. Like we'll get there, we'll do it together, that kind of thing. But like, if I'm planning like a documentary shoot, like I need to know what I am walking into and whether this is going to be strong enough to like stand on its own.
Right.
And that's kind of how I think about that. And then, the flip side of that is like a lot of times you're not even going to know what your best stuff is until it's like about to happen right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just comes with like being attentive to people and like understanding how comfortable they are with you and how comfortable they're willing to like tell you things and
how much they'll open up,
what they're going to show you, what they're really going to like, what they're going to let you do. because there's some really cool things that we've been able to do that, you know, we didn't plan. They just, we got there and, you know, they were fine with us just like doing whatever, essentially. Like we did this shoot last week at a company in Delaware that makes spacesuits.
Oh yeah. This is part of like the NASA piece that you're working
part of
on,
this
right?
NASA project that we're working on. And like we were pretty sure, but not 100% sure that they were actually going to like suit the guy up and put on a spacesuit and stuff.
Okay.
But I didn't know that I was going to be able to like kind of ask him to do certain things, and like he was going to like kind of be at my command, and I would like let him do stuff. And like I was able to like literally tape up a lavalier mic inside the spacesuit and thread it up into the helmet. And then I have audio of this guy inside a spacesuit with all the fans and the circulation and the comm control and all that stuff like going on inside.
You probably hear that like wah, 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 wah,
yeah,
like,
yeah. It's all
you
hear like the like all that, because it's like an air system. So basically, there's like fans and there's actually tubes of water that run throughout the entire space system. Okay. And that's how they cool it down. That's like the cooling system is they circulate and cool water throughout the exterior of the suit. Whoa. Because they're like 350 pounds.
Yeah.
So like, you know, in space, obviously you don't feel that, but
does that help create like a seal layer too? Like having like a water, you know, whatever.
I don't know if it helps create a seal layer, but it's on their like kind of, they wear like this like spandex thing before they even like get into the spacesuit. And that's where like the circulation things are. Gotcha. And then the spacesuit itself actually like literally disperses like water through tubes throughout the entire spacesuit.
That's crazy.
Just to keep them cool. But like that stuff, like I didn't know that walking in. And when, you know, the guy was like, hey, like we're putting the helmet on, like you guys like want to put a mic in there? And I was like, yep, sure. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to figure it out. Yeah. And I was like, just went and grab it, set it up, plug it in, hope it works. And, you know, because I don't want to hold an astronaut up. And, like, and you know, you just find ways to make that stuff work. So I think like being open and telling someone like, hey, I want you to do this because I think it'll look really good on camera. And I would love to showcase that for you in the finished piece. Gotcha. And I think that's the other big pillar of that is like communicating that like everything that I'm doing on a shoot is to help you. The reason I'm here is to showcase you. The reason that I'm here is to tell this story. Can you please show me this? Because I feel like this will help do that. Right. Yeah. And that's how I approach it a lot of the time.
I like a story from one of my experiences, like getting to shoot with Harley Newman. I did a news piece with Haley O'Brien. She came in and did all this interview stuff. She was, first of all, the epitome of open to surprises.
Haley's fantastic. Yeah.
She got invited to lay on a bed of nails, and they not only laid her on a bed of nails, they put a cinder block on her chest and then broke it with a sledgehammer. Yes. She'd never done that before, and she just like, okay, let's do this. Yeah. Like, you know, and she went through it, and she was fine. But it was like, that was a big situation where it's like, okay, like I'm just gonna go with this and trust the situation and see what we get. And we got incredible footage from that day. Harley did the same thing where like, I know that he doesn't really like doing fire stuff as much anymore just because it's dangerous. You put other people in danger around you. But for that, he like gave me a look and he's like, we're doing some fire stuff. And
you're like, hell yeah, dude.
Oh yeah. Let me get the slow-mo.
So give me 1 second.
Yeah. So I grab my stuff, grab all my little equipment, and you go with what's presented to you in those situations.
You have to. And like a piece that I've been shooting over recently is like we're documenting the postseason for one of the high school basketball teams in their area. Okay. So they're Bethlehem Catholic High School. Oh yeah. And their head coach is a guy named Jose Medina. Awesome guy. Yeah. We did a piece on him last year.
Okay.
Together.
Yeah. He was really cool.
So now we're doing like a docu-series, like, cause they're undefeated, like going through the playoffs and stuff like that. So we're doing this series, and he's basically open to us, like miking him up every single time that we're there. Yeah. So every single time, like I'll bring a mic and I'll like let it roll and I'll just like see what I can get. But then there's times where he's like, there was like the first time we shot, he's like, it was like the end of the game and they had just won. He's like, do you want to come down to the locker room? And I was like, yep. And just like, you just follow them down and you just like roll with the punches and you just like see what's going to happen. Exactly. And, that was where I got my best stuff. Nice. It like was just like in a setting like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those, it's kind of like hidden gems. You don't expect it, but there's these things that will pop up.
But it comes back to trust.
Yeah.
And like it comes back to like connecting with the people that you're with and making them feel comfortable, communicating your intentions. I feel like is really important.
That's a big point that you had on here was connect with the talent and the team.
Yes.
So like that would be, you know, connecting with the people that you're interviewing or like your actors or whatever, but getting that repertoire with them so that they open up a little bit more, they get a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
And then also with your team so that they know like, hey, you know, this interview might have shifted course a little bit, but keep rolling.
Yeah.
Like this is important stuff and, you know, do, you know, X, Y, and Z. But that comfortability. So like how did you know, how did that become part of your workflow?
Well, I think a lot of it became part of my workflow because, you know, at Temple, it was like, I was just like this college student with a camera and I'd like go into this office for like a professor that like didn't really want to be there, that kind of thing. So it was really hard for like actually like, you know, and you're schlepping all this stuff by yourself and like you're trying to figure it out on the fly and you
just
have
making
no
it by passion
idea. You
alone.
have no idea what's happening. And so like you go from that to like a place at like PBS where like people know your name and like people like understand like what you represent and you know that like you represent the station. Yeah. And so I think a lot of the time I have to be like on the entire time I'm there.
Gotcha.
And I think like it starts with like a handshake and not even like taking a camera out of the bag right away, like walking around with the person.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, like it helps see any space before I shoot, but like it also like helps me to get to like talk to someone and like interact with someone and like understand, you know, I'll try and find like something I can banter with them about.
Even like figuring out who calls the shots on the place too.
Exactly.
Like, who has access. Like we were shooting at like a NCC, which is it's a community college. So we're walking into the space and, you know, we're getting to know the person beforehand. We haven't even taken the gear out of the truck, but that just going through that, first of all, she was then willing to help us out with anything. She also had control of the space, so she gave us access to the lights and to the, you know, the dimmers that they had and the audio that they were going to use. She knew the whole plan, but if we hadn't gone in and talked to her beforehand, we would have just been guessing what we needed. We would have been like searching for lights. It would have just been a much more involved process for us if we didn't have her as that facilitator. Yeah,
exactly. And that like comes into play like with me on shoots like all the time. Like we interviewed what is his name? I am completely blanking on it in the Sheridan.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'm blanking on his.
I forget his first name too.
I don't know why I'm blanking on his first name. His father was Bill Sheridan. Larry.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Larry Sheridan. Larry Sheridan is, I think, 87 years old, something like that. And he was for the soccer documentary, like he was the son of the original coach of the team.
Yeah, so like integral part of the documentary.
Biggest get of the documentary. The guy who like knew his father, knew these players, like knew what they were like, you know.
These are like first person stories, basically.
Exactly.
He's talking from his perspective of seeing his father do this stuff.
Yeah, very, very cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I think like the day that we went in there, like we hadn't met him before. We kind of like had talked on the phone and we just like kind of showed up. But, you know, and I think, I don't know, we didn't break out a camera for 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Like
we just got to know him.
And we like he took out his photo albums and he started, and I was like, can you keep those out? Like we'll probably like shoot those later, like get a couple of those pictures, that kind of thing.
Being open to opportunities
and stuff like that. And it paid off in the long run because when we were short on content in the final editing phase, he dug up these old photo albums with all of these original prints that his father bought like a professional photographer, because the team had so much money that they paid for a professional photographer to take pictures of this team, and it was just sitting in this guy's basement. These like awesome. These old prints and film reels. Luckily, he had them converted. Like he had them printed into actual like glossy photo.
Gotcha.
So like we didn't have to like go and like develop the film or anything.
Right.
But he still had the original film.
That's fantastic.
And it saved the entire documentary.
Yeah.
Because you had this guy with that knew us, that was comfortable with us, and I literally called him up and we like went over that day.
That's huge, and that like that little extra rapport that you had between the two of you made him willing to go that extra mile to like dig up that stuff. And that really made the doc.
Yeah. And, you know, at the end of the day, like it's just always going to help to like be on the same page with someone when you're with them all day.
Yeah.
And like, that's what I come back to too, is like, you know, I'll admit, like, I'm still struggling. Like, I definitely get overwhelmed sometimes. Like, I definitely get stressed out, and I definitely get like short and on it and that sort of thing. But at the same time, like, at least I'm conscious of that now, and I understand when that's happening.
Yeah.
And I understand that, okay, I'm with this either this PR person or this mother that I'm like literally spending the day with. Like,
Right.
I have to be able to like still connect with that person at the end of the day, because then they're gonna want to like connect with me.
Yeah.
So at least like that's like the big meta producing stuff. But in the raw producing stuff, like knowing what you're going to see in the space, if there's cool old documents there, if there's old pictures there, are they integral to telling the story?
Finding details like that.
Finding like little details like that, is them being outside the house important, like little things like that. Like how many different settings can I put them in that's going to like help them, so we're not in this one room the whole time.
Yeah. Changing up the scenery and stuff like that.
It's all these like different little things. And again, like I feel like I'm just like here, like I'm just like word vomiting, but it's all stuff that like you just kind of really get used to over time, and it just becomes and this is like, I think this is our original point. All of these things are intrinsic to what I do every day now. All of these things I have to do every day, or else I'm not going to be successful at my job.
Constant practice is what you get.
Constant practice. And it's, you know, and I've learned this stuff after like a year and a half of like doing it every day. And that's like kind of a long, you know, it's not a short amount of time by any, it's a little bit, but like at the end of the day, like when you're doing it every day, like it takes a bit to like really, really get a grapple on all of these things. Because like you're dealing with technology at the same time that you're dealing with people, and at the same time you're dealing with like the creative eye and stuff like that. Like it's a lot to manage. It's a lot to manage.
That is for sure.
In some ways,
absolutely, I think the last point that we had for producing was just don't be afraid to control your environment, and I feel like we've touched on this a couple of times throughout. Like in shooting, it's, you know, knowing your lighting and being able to do stuff with that. It's knowing your gear and knowing what you can do with that. It's creating depth of field. But also in the edit, it's you know, being aware of what you're going to do in the edit, like having that plan, and then being able to go into a space and you know, go like, okay, I want this to be a little more dramatic, so we're gonna dim all the lights. We're gonna do that thing where we start from zero and add some lighting and really like control that environment, move some furniture. I mean, I know several situations like at Hatboro every other week. We go in there and we move booths. Like we're moving barber's chairs. We're
moving like a 300-pound barber's chair, dragging it across the floor.
Because we need that shot.
We just need that shot, man. You gotta have it.
Exactly, gotta have it.
But that's the thing, is like I'm at the point now where like I understand that if someone's invited me there to shoot and they're okay with it, they're probably gonna be okay with me asking them to like move a conference table around. Or like being able to like move some stuff out of the way, stage some stuff behind people. Because at the end of the day, like what I come back to always for me is like, I'm doing this, I want this to look as good as possible. Can you help me do that?
Exactly.
And that's like, and that's what it ties back to for me.
Yeah.
But you know, manipulating the environment, having them like, it was really hard for me when an interview's sitting down and I noticed that it could be better if I just like move them a little bit to say it. And now it's like you find ways to say that. You find ways like, hey, like
maintain rapport, but still
maintain rapport, communicate that I need to do this because this is part of my job, and really, really being like detail oriented. Because like frankly, like I don't consider myself someone that's like that detail oriented. I think,
which is crazy to me.
I think I let things slip through the cracks all the time. I think that I'm like I don't think that I'm like so like particular and stuff like that. But like I think in my job I am at this point.
That's the thing is, I think because you feel like you're not super detail oriented, I think that makes you more detail oriented
because I'm trying to compensate.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you see that as like a shortcoming, so you focus on it and you build on it more. But because you've been doing that for so long, you now have the experience of being detail oriented.
Yeah.
But it's all because you think that you're not.
Yeah. And maybe like that's the norm now.
Yeah.
And so if it's the norm is me doing that, I feel like I'm not doing it. It's this weird, like, vicious cycle almost that you get in of
the vicious cycle of your being better.
Vicious cycle of my dumb brain. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I don't know. There's just so many different things that go into it, but you know, it feels like it comes more naturally than it ever has before.
Yeah. And if you have those little key points for each role that you're working on, it really smooths things out in the end.
Yeah. And you know, being able to do all of those different things has only like benefited me. It's been hard for sure. And it's been like hard when I, you know, really have a project that I want to edit, but I have to go shoot something.
Right.
Like those are like kind of like little sacrifices that you have to make. Like you have to be able to use your time really well. Yeah. You have to be able to like understand that, you know, you only have this budgeted allotment to work on this certain project. I got to think about it when I'm driving home. Yeah. So I know what I'm doing right when I get there.
Absolutely.
And it's just constantly stuck in that prison.
So to get out of that prison a little bit.
Sure.
We talked about like our last kind of point on the list was like what's coming for the future of production. And we were talking a little bit about like the different genres that you see as getting big, things that are sort of changing in the industry, and directions that are, you know, looking like good opportunities.
Yeah.
So you talked about feature documentaries.
Yeah. Which is now a completely, there's so many boxes that can encompass now, which I think like my goal is to like do stuff that is considered like raw documentary work.
Gotcha.
Like Ken Burns is the GOAT.
Gotcha.
If I can do anything close to the newest thing that he did was a 4-part PBS series called College Behind Bars.
Oh,
which I don't know if you saw that yet.
No, I haven't.
It's unbelievable. It's about the Bard prison program, which basically you have 30 inmates in the New York State penitentiary system that get admitted to basically an undergrad program at Bard College, which is one of the best liberal arts schools in the country.
Wow.
And they go through the same rigorous course load that all of the students at Bard do, and they only have like computers for access for like a 1 hour a day or stuff like that. They have to request all of the literature that they want. And it's all about this group of men and women that are, you know, learning how to like be the, you know, redemption and be the best version of themselves, and like why education is so important. All of these different things. He's a master at it.
Wow.
So like Ken and the way that is shot, it's like, you know, they're in a prison. It's not that pretty.
Yeah.
But it's tonal. And, you know, every shot is used with purpose.
Yeah.
So like, and everything that you watch from Ken Burns is like that.
Absolutely.
The Vietnam War series or baseball, the Brooklyn Bridge, like all of that stuff is it's all done with so much purpose. So
it's wild how he does like a variety of content like that, and it seems like he brings the same passion to everything. Like it's all just really, really high level.
It's just, I think it's the best form of storytelling.
Gotcha.
If that's what we're on, like I don't think anyone does it better.
And it really has become I see like film and cinema as broken into two parts, where it's you have narrative film, which is all your creative stuff, all of your fantasy, your fiction, even some nonfiction. Like there's film, and then there's narrative work, which is like all documentary, or sorry, not narrative work, like documentary type stuff.
Yeah.
Which is all realistic things. You're telling a story. There are, you know, mockumentaries within that. So you can do fictional documentary style, but it's like this whole other half of film that's been created into so many different subgenres now.
There's just a really like appealing part of doing something where like I'm embedded on a project for like a very like 2 years.
Yeah,
like
there's that deep dive.
There's something really appealing to that for me.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, like I just think that I would really love doing that. And like now that there are so many different outlets and series and streaming platforms that are investing in this stuff.
Right.
Like, I think we were talking about this earlier. Like, I think that genre is like bigger than it ever has been before.
Absolutely.
And it's like, and it's just gaining more and more publicity. Like, you know, now you have outlets like the New York Times and like the Guardian that are like investing in that type of content.
Yeah.
Because like people digest that now. Like, if it's available to them, they don't have to go to a movie theater to watch a documentary.
Yeah.
You know, and like a lot of the times I feel like people weren't going to go to the movies to watch a documentary. You want to see a film. Like, you want to see something that was like, you know, constructed and grand and all of that.
Yeah.
But now it's like, you know, you have all these nonfiction outlets that that these high profile production companies are like really getting into now.
Yeah. Like
And
all those streaming services, there's, you know, giant movie franchises these days. There's a lot of big stuff on the narrative side.
Yep.
But like documentary has quickly caught up where you know, I feel like I have friends that I would never ever expect to watch anything nonfiction that are coming to me and telling me like, hey, have you seen that like colorized documentary that Peter Jackson did? It's mind blowing. It's incredible and all this stuff. And it's like, you watched a documentary? Like, it's reaching wider audiences.
It's not Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. It's
exactly.
crazy.
But like, there's so many good, and I think like the series thing is so important too.
Yeah.
Because there was never a platform for that before.
Absolutely.
And now there is. And it's not, you get 1-2 hour window to tell this story. You can tell this story digested, broken up for like 45 minutes over 6 parts.
Yeah.
And that's so much more digestible to a consumer.
You know, I'm just thinking about this now. Like, speaking of digestible, I feel like there's got to be a tie-in to streaming services and documentaries, because I feel like there's a bit of social pressure when you're watching a documentary in a movie theater. Like, you don't get the chance to react individually first.
Mm-hmm.
You get the chance to like react, but then you hear what everyone else's reactions are at the same time. You're reacting as a group.
Right.
Whereas at home, you get to sit there and like really think about what you're watching.
Yeah.
Like I remember watching that documentary on Ted Bundy that came out recently, and it was just super intense. Like it felt like a fictional story in that it was just so dramatic.
Yeah.
But all of it was real.
Mm-hmm.
So like in the way that they presented it and all that stuff. And I remember watching it at home and like really getting to analyze how I felt about the characters involved. And it was eye-opening watching it that way. And I don't think that it would have been experienced the same way for me in like a movie theater.
Right. Well, it's also like, it's a series.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, could they have crammed all that into 2 hours?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think you can.
Yeah.
And that's where this lane has opened up now, where I think like stories are deeper and they're more complex.
Yeah.
And they're better shot. And, you know, just the entire structure around them is so much deeper, I think. One of the best things that I think that you can watch is that on Netflix is, even if you're not into sports, is Last Chance U and Cheer.
Okay.
Which is directed by Greg Whitley.
Gotcha.
And Last Chance U profiles a junior college football team.
Okay.
Like a powerhouse junior college football team.
Right.
Which basically what happens if guys go to college and maybe they mess up in college and they get in trouble and they get kicked out of school. This is kind of like their last chance.
Okay.
To like pursue that professional football career or go back to college and stuff. So it's this really, really interesting microcosm of all of these like hotshot guys who were like the man in high school, and now they're in middle of Kansas, nowhere, all competing to just get out and like pump their stats and everything like that.
Jeez.
But it's like it's like a 6-part, every like season is like a 6-part series, and they dive into the characters. They'll interview the people, and then they'll like go to their hometown and do like a profile vignette on like where they came from and their upbringing and what they've been through. And it's just
like serious depth to it.
It's beautifully crafted.
Wow.
And you know, it's like 8 hours of content.
Yeah.
On this one football team.
Jeez.
And that's the kind of stuff where like I talk about like embedding and stuff like that. Like, like really digging in. Like that stuff is like super, super appealing.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly a good time to be a storyteller. That's for sure.
I hope so, man.
Yeah.
I hope so. I hope we're getting to that point at least.
There's lots of cool stuff I think in the future for you. That's for sure.
I appreciate that.
You're doing some crazy
you
stuff
as
already.
Well,
I
you as well.
That,
you're self-made as hell.
So what's some social media or like some profile that we could find you out online? What's your stuff?
My stuff. My website is danraymedia.com.
Nice.
So that's where I have a reel, and I
haven't seen that yet.
There you go. That's where I have like work examples. My production reel is on there, which has to be updated, so don't judge it. It hasn't been updated since like August.
That's the eternal status for like creators.
It's like, oh yeah, like I've done better stuff, I promise. That's not the end all be all. So that's my website. I try to update that as frequently as I can.
Awesome.
And then my Instagram is @theyoungdaniel.
At the Young Daniel.
And then my Twitter is @DanielJ_Ray.
Awesome. We'll have all those links down in the description. People go check them out.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on the podcast,
Thank you very much, Stay Fan.
We'll have to have you again soon. And,
I appreciate
and
that.
chat more about production stuff.
This was quite a pleasure.
Well, thank you for watching another episode of the FCMG Podcast. As always, we appreciate you being here, and peace.